So, inshallah, today, inshallah, we'll start chapter 6. We'll talk about network layer. And as we discussed before, network layer facilitates the communication from one local network to another remote network. And in doing that, you have one local network, which is again terminated by a router. And any host in this network wants to communicate with another remote network, and the network layer facilitates or allows these routers to support this communication from one local network all the way to the remote network. Okay, so in doing that, the network layer has some main functionalities. Some of them are, as usual, encapsulation and decapsulation, which they are common between each layer, between all the layers. So each layer will have to do encapsulation for the layer above it and decapsulation for the layer below it. Okay, so encapsulation and decapsulation is as usual. There are two distinct functionalities for network layer, including addressing. So again, we talked about addressing in network access layer. However, the addressing here is logical addressing. And the addressing is used to identify the sending host and the receiving host. Okay? So addressing here is logical address. And the address itself gives us some information about where or the location of that remote host is. However, just the fact that we know the location doesn't mean that we know how to get there, right? In order to get there, you know where Qatar University is. But when you get out of your house, you have to take certain path in order to reach to your final destination. So that's what we mean by routing. So routing is the main function in the network layer that allows these routers to direct the packets in a certain path, okay, in order to reach to the final destination. So that's the difference between addressing, logical addressing, which is part of the network layer, and routing. Routing includes forwarding because, again, routing gives us the idea about the end-to-end path. So we'll go this way. So we have other routers here or there, and there is some topology between these routers. However, we choose to go in that direction because we feel that this is the shortest path. But sometimes the straightforward path is not necessarily the shortest path. Okay? So for example, if there is any construction at some point, so you may have to divert and go to another path. So that's the main job of the routing. So routing will give us some idea about the end-to-end path that we have to take in order to deliver the packet to the final destination. Okay? And as part of this, each router will have to perform some forwarding based on the information that it has. In doing this, the routing layer has certain characteristics, three major characteristics. The first thing is that it's connectionless. And we define what connectionless means in chapter 3, if you remember. Connectionless means that we do not have to establish an end-to-end connection before we start communicating. It's like the basic mail service. Okay? So we want to send a letter, we just send it. So the sender will go to the post office, or the router will deliver the letter to the router, and the router will direct it. The receiver doesn't know that there is something coming because there is no end-to-end connection. So I don't have to wait to establish an end-to-end connection before I start communicating. So that's connectionless. Okay? The second characteristic is best effort. If we have a connection, then we can have some guarantees on delivering the mail. But again, this is not an enough guarantee. So best effort talks about the fact that there are no guarantees for delivery. And if there is any error, I'll just drop the packet and I don't care about anything else. I don't give any guarantees that this packet will arrive correctly. or arrive to the destination. Okay, so that's what best effort means, which is someone might perceive it as a bad thing, which it is, but this is what the network layer does. It does not provide any guarantees for delivery or that the packet will not arrive in error. I do not provide any guarantees. That's what best effort means. Okay. The other or third characteristic is that it's medium independent. As we said before, network access layer in general is medium dependent. And we have to differentiate between, we have Ethernet or we have wired cables, then we have to use Ethernet, and fiber optics, they have different protocols in the network access layer. Starting from the network layer up, we don't care what the medium is. Okay? So the network layer is medium independent. It doesn't care because it sends the packet over multiple networks. So in doing that, it doesn't care whether this network is actually fiber optics or UTP cables or wireless. It deals with all of them. And it doesn't care what this medium is. Okay? There is one trick to the medium independence here that we have to pay attention to, that again, we deal with all types of medium. All types of media here, we're agnostic to whatever type of media that we use in each network. However, there is one parameter in each network which might be different from one network to another. Okay? Which is what we refer to as the maximum transmission unit. So sometimes, when we move from Ethernet, for example, to wireless, the maximum transmission unit for Ethernet is how much? 100. Yeah. Maximum transmission unit. Maximum transmission unit, يعني the frame itself.
46.
No, the minimum is 64. Yeah, صح, you're perfectly right. But the maximum is 1500. 1500.
1,500.
Yes, 1,500.
Megabytes?
لا, bytes. So if you have a long message, you have to divide it. And actually, this happens in the application. So
it's about 1.5 kilobytes.
Yeah. This is for one frame. So when you move from Ethernet to wireless, for example, wireless tends to have a lower maximum transmission unit. So 1500 will become like 700, 800, something like this. So what do? So you have a box that has a size of 1500, and all of a sudden when you move from one network to another, you have a smaller box. What do? You have to break this box into two and put it in two buckets, okay, instead of one. So network layer deals with that, but again deals with this, which is what we call fragmentation. Deals with fragmentation, but again that doesn't mean that it's medium dependent. We actually need to read one parameter from the network access layer, which is the maximum transmission unit. Based on this parameter, we don't care what the medium is. We just want to read one parameter, which is the maximum transmission unit. If the maximum transmission unit from one network to another gets smaller, then the network layer will perform a fragmentation. We'll divide the packet into 2 or 3 packets. Okay? But that doesn't mean that it's medium dependent.
What's the opposite of fragmentation?
Defragmentation. Okay? It's like encapsulation, decapsulation. Okay? So we'll talk about fragmentation in details in the next lecture. But again, here we're talking about the characteristics, which is medium independent. In general, network layer is medium independent. Okay? So the first exercise here talks about the functionality of the network layer. So we need to differentiate these definitions, whether they refer to encapsulation, decapsulation, routing, or addressing. So we need to make sure that we understand these concepts, and whatever tweaking of the wording here, that we're not confused which of these functionality that we really refer to. Okay? So you need to go through these definitions and figure out which one that we refer to here. We use addressing as part of routing, but you need to distinguish between the two. Just the fact that I know your address, it doesn't mean that I know how to reach you. In order to direct my car and reach your place, I need to know the end-to-end path. So this is routing. At every single step, at every roundabout, I need to know how to, whether to go left or right or backward or whatever, right? Forwarding itself is also part of knowing the end-to-end path, okay? But what I use to perform forwarding, I actually look up the address in the packet itself. So at every single router, the router will pick up the packet, will take the destination address of the ultimate host, اللي هو العنوان يعني, and then it consults the routing table. And the routing table will tell the router whether to go left or right. Direct the packets whether to left or right. As someone was saying, Tama, this is what the switch does. The switch more or less does that. Yes, it does a similar job. However, the switch forwards the packet on a particular output interface within the LAN using what? The MAC address, your name, okay? Not using the logical address, okay? So the difference is big in that case, because the router forwards the packet to another network. The switch performs the switching functionality within the same network using the physical address. The router will forward the packet from one network to another using the logical address. Again, we said that there is a big difference between physical address and logical address. Physical address means your name. The logical address indicates where you are. Okay, there is a big difference. Okay? So, what's used for forwarding packets to destination? Well, forwarding is part of routing. Here there's nothing new, but what do I have to use in order to forward? This is addressing. Okay?
Physical address.
Here is logical address. For forwarding, here is logical address. To forward packets, what do I have to use in order to forward packets, whether to left or right? To forward packets left or right, which is forwarding, again, this is part of routing end-to-end. However, I need one piece of information in order to direct packets left or right. And this piece of information is the logical address. If I know that I'm going to QU, then I know from my current location I have to go left. That's forward. Okay? So the address of QU, given the address of QU, I need to forward my car to left or right.
So from one network to another, do you need both addresses or just the physical address?
From one network to another, you need the logical address. Within the same network, you need the physical address. And that's why, as we said before, the physical address has a significance within one network. When you move from one network to another, the physical address itself changes in the frame. Remember we said that? If you have multiple routers,
The default gateway, right?
yes, the default gateway of the local network. Here, the physical address of the destination will be the physical address of the default gateway, right? When this router picks it up, it will regenerate or re-encapsulates the frame with different destination address and logical and source address in the MAC layer, which is this will be the new source MAC address, and this will be the new destination MAC address. So if you have a frame that has MAC address and IP address, those two addresses will have to change at every hop. We talked about that. Will have to change at every hop. The IP address, it doesn't change. The IP address in the packet, it should never change. Okay? So from one hop to another, if I'm going to QU, when I go towards QU, I cannot just change the address of QU from one location to another. It stays the same. But the physical address tells me that you go from this point to this point. Okay? Once you go beyond this point, you need to change the physical address. I'm going now from this point to this point, and so on. So you keep changing the 2 points that you go from one to another. Okay? But the address, the ultimate address that you need to reach to, should never change. Okay? So in the frame itself, I have, at every router, I have to do decapsulation and encapsulation. During that, I have to change the MAC address, both for source and destination, at every hop. At every hop, I have to change the physical address over and over again until I reach the final destination. But the logical address should never change. Okay? All right, so the addressing is used for forwarding, adds an IP header to the transport layer segment. This is a encapsulation. Selects the path for a packet. This is a routing. Okay. Removes the frame header. This is a decapsulation. And then used to send back to the source in case of error. This is a addressing. And in particular, we mean source address. So what are the sources of errors here? It could be that the packet arrives in error, like one bit has changed. It could be that the packet will actually circulate, because sometimes you try to reach to one destination and then you get lost, right? So the packet keeps circulating in the network, and then one router eventually will decide to drop it. It doesn't work that the packet will stay forever. So at some point we have to drop it. So we'll talk about how do we do that. Okay, so that's the first activity. This activity talks about, again, the characteristics of IP, including connectionless, best effort, and medium independent. So we need also to take the right definition at each column. So the benefit of the interaction with the student, it tells me where your confusion is. So the biggest confusion is by the fact that connectionless means no guarantee. No, they are two separate things. Okay? So we need to clear that issue. Just the fact that you establish a connection, it doesn't mean that your guarantee is 100%. Okay? Just the fact that you establish a connection end-to-end, it doesn't mean that you provide guarantee 100%. It helps. It helps. But it doesn't mean that your guarantee is 100%. Why? Because you may simply lose the connection. In this case, what do you do? Well, if you lose the connection, and then you go back and re-establish the connection and make sure that all the packets that have been waiting for the connection to come back have been delivered, then this is not best effort. This is providing guarantees back. Okay? And just the fact that you do not have a connection, you do not establish the connection, it doesn't mean that you cannot provide guarantees. Why? Because you may not have a connection, but at every router, if one router decides to drop the packet for any reason, it may actually inform back the source, okay? And the source may do something about it. In which case, this is providing guarantees. مفهوم؟ يعني يبقى those are two different things. Establishing or not establishing the connection will help, but it doesn't mean providing 100% guarantees. Okay? So establishing the connection will help. Originally will help the packets arrive taking one path. Okay? And they will have to arrive in order, because all the packets will take the same path, which means that implicitly they will arrive in order. Okay? But what happens if the connection is lost? Do you guarantee that none of the packets will not be delivered? If that's the case, then it's not best effort. This is providing guarantees. Okay? It happens that IP is connectionless and it does not provide guarantees. Okay? So those are two different things. I hope I cleared that confusion now. Okay, so no contact is made with the destination. This means a connectionless. So the destination is not expecting my mail. Okay? So that's connectionless. Fiber optic cabling and satellites can all be used for routing, can all be used to send packets from one network to another. This is a medium independent. Will send a packet even if the destination is not able to receive it. That's a connectionless. It's not expecting, if the destination is not expecting the packet, I will also send it. Because this is clear back. If I establish the connection, this means the receiver is expecting me. So?
Yeah.
If I establish the connection, this means that the receiver is expecting my mail. If I don't establish the connection, then the receiver will not know.
So why we don't make a connection between the sender and the receiver so that the another IP will know if there is a connection coming or not?
Okay, so the question is, why IP is connectionless? Why don't we establish a connection end to end? Because this will help provide some kind of reliability. This type of reliability will come with a cost, or the establishing the connection will come with a cost, right? When you establish a connection, you need to maintain that connection. You need to store the connection context. For each connection there is a context, and you need to store that context somehow. It happens that routers, they actually establish the communication between two networks on the whole internet. So you can imagine the number of connections that have to be maintained by every single router is you're talking about millions. Okay, so this will entail lots of processing overhead on the router. So the decision was made that the router has to perform routing very fast, and in that case it has to be connectionless because it needs to it doesn't need to maintain all these millions of connections. Actually, this is one of the reasons that IP has dominated the internet. Because in the past there was another protocol in the network layer called ATM. And ATM is not automatic teller machines. ATM here is the protocol in the network layer, and that was connection oriented. Okay, that actually died for IP, because IP sometimes simplicity dominates, or simplicity actually will allow you to dominate. Okay, and that's what happened for the case of IP. In addition to some politics, of course, some companies pushed for IP to dominate the internet, of course. Okay, so we'll adjust the size of the packet send. This is part of fragmentation and defragmentation, and that refers to medium independent. Does not guarantee that the packet will be delivered. This is a في حد عنده أي رأي آخر؟
دكتور معلش بالبداية أنت قلت الكونكشن lesson it's not guaranteed.
Right.
طيب هنا برضه not guaranteed.
Yeah, ما هو that's why this is not connectionless. Here,
الاثنين not guaranteed.
yeah, does not provide any guarantees, or packet delivery is not guaranteed. And I'm just changing or tweaking the wording just to make sure that the students will not get confused. So that those two, they mean the same thing. ايه اللي كيف تعرف؟ الاثنين they mean the same thing. اللي هو ايه؟ best effort. So both of them they mean best effort. They have nothing to do with connectionless. فهمت الفرق؟ يعني فاهم الفرق؟ يعني not providing guarantees, this is best effort.
طب what is
A connectionless means that I don't establish a connection, which entails that the receiver is not expecting me to send anything, but I send it anyway. Okay? وقلنا ان just the fact that we have connection lists, it doesn't mean that we cannot provide guarantees. We still can. If we want, we still can. How? At every single router, if the router decides to drop the packet for any reason, it will have to inform the source, and the source will have to retransmit. And so in that case, it's not best effort. In the case of IP doesn't do that. And that's why it's best effort. And just the fact that you establish the connection also, it doesn't mean that you can provide 100% guarantees. An example of this is when you lose the connection, what do you do? When you lose the connection, if you don't do anything, then that's best effort. Even though it's connection oriented, but it's best effort. Because you lost the connection and you didn't do anything about it. But if you make sure that you re-establish the connection somehow, and make sure that none of the packets will be lost in the network, then this is not best effort. So those two are two different things. Okay? There is some separation between the two. Any confusion? Anyone still confused about this?
You said no, you said best effort is not guaranteed the delivery.
Right.
So what if it is an important information?
That's a very good question.
Videos.
That's a very good question.
Then you make a connection, basically.
But this, but you make a connection. But this is not in the network layer. Remember, we talked about protocol suite. We said that protocol suite is a group of interrelated protocols that work hand in hand. So they complement each other. So just the fact that IP is best effort, it doesn't mean that the packet will be lost forever, because we still have the chance in the transport layer to compensate for that. Because in the transport layer we may have TCP. TCP is reliable. TCP بقى يعني is very persistent. ممكن يقعد 3 ساعات عشان يديليفر السيجنال. يعني وراها لغاية ما توصل. Okay? That's TCP.
Connection oriented TCP.
وconnection oriented كمان. فconnection oriented ورeliable الاثنين.
والUDP connectionless.
والUDP بقى connectionless وunreliable. طيب if we have IP and then we have UDP, what do we do if there is any packet lost? It's up to you بقى. Maybe for video it's not a big deal. But for مثلا zip file ولا maybe it's a big deal. So what do we do in the case of zip file? Well, you have the choice not to use UDP, use TCP, or use UDP and compensate the reliability in the application layer. يعني معناه ان انت عمال ترحل المشكلة in each layer. You don't provide guarantees in the network layer, provide it in the transport. If you need guarantees but you don't want to provide it in the transport layer, provide it in the application layer. Because at the end of the day, these protocols, they work hand in hand. Okay? Any confusion? Okay.